For video 2, I'm going to follow the outline that Professor Voog provided us with on Canvas, beginning with Part A. As discussed in my first video, I have been observing and assisting in Mrs. Riddle's first grade classroom at Sharon Elementary School in Alpine School District. To reiterate, Mrs. Riddle's class consists of about 30% English language learners, with the majority being Hispanic. There are 25 students in her class. The cooperating teacher has a very energetic teaching style. She initiates a lot of hands-on activities, creates an environment where the students have many opportunities to interact and communicate with one another, and differentiates her instruction by teaching small groups on their level. The classroom exudes a warm atmosphere where the students feel safe and appear to enjoy learning. Part B, there were several valuable strategies I learned about working with English language learners at my field experience. They are as follows. Number 1, increase ELL students' English language production and peer interaction. There are 2 key items ELLs need in order to improve their English: time and practice. There's nothing teachers can do to rush English acquisition, but there are many ways to provide opportunities to practice English in the classroom. If activities are structured to support student-to-student or group interaction, ELLs are required to use English to explain concepts and contribute to the work. This gives teachers an opportunity to gauge what the student has learned, and it demonstrates student progress in English language development. Number 2, explicitly teach English language vocabulary and structures. Teachers play a critical role in supporting language development. Beyond teaching children to read and write in school, they need to help children learn and use aspects of language associated with the academic discourse of the various school subjects. They need to help them become more aware of how language functions in various modes of communication across the curriculum. They need to understand how language works well enough to select materials that will help expand their students' linguistic horizons, and to plan instructional activities that give students opportunities to use the new forms and modes of expression to which they are being exposed. Teachers need to understand how to design the classroom language environment so as to optimize language and literacy and to avoid linguistic obstacles to content area learning. Number 3, build on ELL's background knowledge to increase comprehension. Teachers can work creatively to elicit background knowledge from students on content topics in order to increase comprehension of the material. This may be as simple as taking the time to do a KWL, or know, want to know, and learned chart, or as individualized as asking questions about the topic. For example, questions proposed by my first grade teacher one day were, has anyone ever visited the jungle? A jungle is like a rainforest. What do you see in a jungle? Students can share their knowledge and see how it is connected to new academic information. Number 4, increase ELL parent involvement. No matter what language you or your students' parents speak, parental support is a big key to academic success. ELL families are often at a disadvantage when it comes to supporting their child because of language and cultural barriers. It can be easy to interpret ELL parent no-shows as a lack of interest in education. However, very often ELL parents want their children to succeed as much as any other parent, but are unable to participate to the same extent that other parents participate due to these barriers on their work schedules. And number 5, increase writing opportunities. The ability to write effectively and accurately to convey a message is a very important skill for a college student and in most careers. However, it often seems as if the curriculum is largely focused on developing reading and math skills. Of course, these are very important too, but students need to have many positive opportunities to develop writing skills in a variety of formats in order to strengthen their communication skills. For ELLs, this is particularly important. Depending on their writing skill level, in their first language and their English language abilities, writing may be frustrating, especially for first grade students. Students need to engage in a variety of writing to develop an understanding of different types of writing and to identify their strengths and weaknesses as a writer. Okay, moving on to part C. I learned some do's and don'ts when it comes to teaching ELLs, and they are as follows. Number 1, modeling. Do model for students what they are expected to do or produce, especially for new skills or activities, by explaining and demonstrating the learning actions, sharing your thinking processes aloud, and showing good teacher and student work samples. And don't just tell students what to do and expect them to do it. First graders especially need a lot of modeling and a lot of guidance. Number 2, rate of speech and wait time. Do speak slowly and clearly and provide students with enough time to formulate their responses, whether in speaking or in writing. Don't speak too fast, and if a student tells you they didn't understand what you said, never ever repeat the same thing in a louder voice. That's not going to get the message across any better. Number 3, use of non-linguistic cues. Do use visuals, sketches, gestures, intonation, and other nonverbal cues to make both language and content more accessible to students. Don't stand in front of the class and lecture or rely on the textbook as your only visual aid. Again, especially in first grade, you can't expect the students to learn based on lecture alone. And number 4, giving instructions. Do give verbal and written instructions. This practice can help all learners, especially ELLs. Don't act surprised if students are lost when you haven't clearly written and explained step-by-step directions. Number 5, check for understanding. Do regularly check that students are understanding the lesson. Don't simply ask, "Are there any questions?" This is not an effective way to gauge what all your students are thinking. A lot of times, whether in first grade or even in a college class, if that question is proposed, many of us don't speak up even if we don't understand what's going on. It's just not a good way or a comfortable way to assess if your students are getting the information. And finally, number 6, encourage development of home language. Do encourage students to continue building their literacy skills in their home language, and don't ban students from using their native language in the classroom. Of course, every teacher has a different opinion or take on this, and you kind of want to abide by their rules, but this was kind of Mrs. Riddle's philosophy and kind of view on this point. Okay, part D. As I reflected back on observing and assisting in Mrs. Riddle's first grade class this past semester, it made me realize how big of an importance parent involvement is, whether the student is an English language learner or not. I had the opportunity of observing 2 night classes out of my field experience time that instructed many of my ELL students' parents on how to speak English. And this night class was designed to help these parents become better acquainted with the predominant language, being English, so that they could better help with their child's homework and communicate with the classroom teacher. I found that these parents have a real intent and desire to be involved in their child's education, but the language barrier has been an obstacle, as I had mentioned previously in this video. I just wanted to end on mentioning some key points from the Finnegan readings that pertain to this example or event I've pointed out. Number one, typically there are significant differences between first and second language learning. First language acquisition involves an initial linguistic experience, while a second language is mastered only by someone who already speaks another language. Number two, even when second language learners haven't been exposed to such terms as noun, verb, and sentence, they're aware of certain linguistic phenomena. For example, the existence of words, the notions of regional, social, and foreign accent, the existence of well-formed and ill-formed sentences, and so on. And number three, among the things that clearly affect mastery of a second language is the learner's motivation. And in this case, the learner could be the student or parent. When you take up residence in a community that uses the target language in its social interactions, integrative motivation encourages you to learn the new language as a way of integrating yourself socially into the community and becoming one of its members. So not only will these parents benefit academically through these classes in assisting their children throughout elementary school and beyond, but become more comfortable as a community member as well. So I have thoroughly enjoyed observing and assisting in Mrs. Riddle's first grade class this past semester. And I really loved that I could apply a lot from the classroom to what we have been studying and discussing in linguistics this semester. As far as any changes that have occurred from the beginning to the end, the class is basically run in the same way. The structure is still set up the same. Of course, the students are learning new topics, going over new materials, different kinds of things. So in that way, the content will differ. But overall, it's been a really good experience.